This is just a 30-minute PSA for everybody who says that tracking is too difficult. If you feel that way, this is the episode for you. Welcome back to the Chef Boy RDN podcast with your host, Chef Boy RDN. Now, I'm going to be honest with y'all. It's actually fairly early in the morning. Still got my morning voice on. A little more husky sounding than usual. Trying to pep it up a little bit. So just keep that in mind. Today, we are going to be talking all about tracking macros. A lot of times, I get a lot of people who come in my office and basically say that they want to do it, but it's too difficult, or they've done it in the past and they didn't find success with it. So I want to talk all about macros today, the benefits, the downside of it, all the things that you need to know, the little tips and tricks that help me when I track. All this coming up on the Chef Boy RDN podcast. So when it comes to tracking macros, let's first discuss what macros are. So with nutrients, you have macronutrients and micronutrients. I've talked about this before, but when you think of micro, of course, that's going to be something small. We discuss a different micronutrient every time we do the vitamin of the week. Spoiler alert, this week it will not be an actual vitamin, it'll be a mineral. But your vitamins and your minerals are going to be what we call your micros, because you don't need a lot of them. You just need a little small portion. Now, when it comes to your macros, these are the building blocks of pretty much your body. It gives your body its overall kind of composition. When you think about muscles and stuff, a lot of that has to do with protein, fat, obviously, and then energy as well. And so all of our macronutrients, the main differentiator is they give us energy. Now, your three major macronutrients are going to be carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And so what tracking is keeping track of those macronutrients. Sometimes, and nowadays, most tracking apps, if you use the app, will also track the micronutrients that's found in the food according to what the app knows about the food, right? So tracking doesn't have to be difficult. You just have to know a couple of tips, a couple of tricks, and you're good to go. Now, let's talk about some of the pros of tracking, or what tracking is even used for. Now, I use tracking in my practice for a few different things. The most obvious one is people come to me and they want to go the tracking route when it comes to losing weight. If you are tracking macros, it can be a very effective way for weight loss. And the reason why is because our body is basically a ball of energy, right? It's energy in, energy out at its simplest form. There are a lot of things that play a factor into that: our metabolism, various, insulin responses and things like that. They can affect how much our body will utilize energy. But at its core, when it comes to weight in general, you got to think energy in, energy out. What I mean by that is, if you are putting in more energy than your body is putting out, then that has to mean that some energy will be stored for later. Well, our body stores our energy mainly in our adipose tissue. It also stores some in our muscles, and things like that. And so, long story short, you'll gain weight. If you are putting out the same amount of energy that you're taking in, meaning that it's pretty much net zero, like what you're taking in is pretty much what you're putting out, you'll maintain your current weight, right? If you are putting in less energy than what you are putting out, you will lose weight. Okay, so this is kind of how weight loss works. When it comes to macros, what they do is they predict based on your height, your weight, and a lot of the equations that we use to determine what your BMR is, which is your basal metabolic rate. This is the rate that your body is when it's at rest. So if you are doing nothing but just laying in the bed and blinking, how many calories will your body use up within the day is your basal metabolic rate. Then you have to account for the fact that most people, not everybody, but most people aren't just laying in the bed and blinking all day, right? And so we're active. We get up, we move around. Anytime we're moving, we use energy to do that. So the thing will calculate based on how your level of activity, how much activity on top of your basal metabolic rate it needs to account for. Okay. And then after that, it'll spit out a number to tell you how many calories you need to eat within a day to lose weight, how many calories you need to eat within a day to maintain your current weight, and how many calories you need to eat in a day to gain weight. So that is tracking basics 101. So the first big reason why we do it again is excuse me, is for weight management. Another reason why we do it, I'll do a 3-day track just to assess macros. And what I mean by that is making sure that they're getting enough protein, making sure that they're getting enough fat or carbohydrates or whatever it is, or they aren't over consuming those 3 macronutrients. And so what we'll do is we'll set up a tracking app and they'll just track their food for like 3 days. It's not to make any adjustments. It's just to see what they're actually eating. It's basically a food journal, right? And what a food journal does is it allows us to assess what you typically eat in a day. Sometimes when it's time for us to verbally recall what we eat in a day, it's a little different from what we actually eat in a day. And then the other thing is it allows you to assess your overall calorie intake. It allows you to assess how many, again, proteins, fats, carbohydrates. So we use it as kind of a recall. Another reason that we use it is to help us assess portions. So a lot of times people will say, well, I just had a little bit of this, or I just had a little bit of that. But when you start adding things together and you kind of keep track of what a little bit is, it can add up pretty quickly. So it's good to help with portion control. It also can help you identify nutrient gaps. With nutrient gaps, there might be some things that you're missing, kind of the same thing with the macros, but in general, it could be some micronutrients or things like that that you're missing. And it helps us to piece those puzzles together. It can also lastly help with medical conditions. So specifically, a lot of times when people find out they they have some form of diabetes, they are put on what we call a consistent carbohydrate diet. And typically, what that means is for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you kind of want to keep your carbohydrates around the same. Most people will tell you for an adult, probably about 65 grams or so of carbohydrates. Tracking helps you to make sure you're not exceeding that number. A lot of times we'll account for when people are recalling, they'll be like, I ain't eat a lot of carbs. I just had, a biscuit. And then they didn't think about I just had a chicken and biscuit. So the biscuit was the carbs. Well, they didn't think about the chicken, being breaded, right? Or they didn't think about the fries that they had on the side. You'll be surprised at the things that people sometimes forget and genuinely forget, not even trying to be like sneaky about it, but they will genuinely not realize what they are putting in their body. So tracking helps with all of those things. Now, there are some cons to tracking, right? You can become very obsessive with it and it can become very stressful. You have to imagine that if you're trying to be accurate, you are literally inputting every single thing as much as you can that you have eaten within a day, right? This can become very obsessive. It can take up a lot of your time and it can become stressful. If you have had any eating disorders or disordered eating in the past, it can actually kind of trigger those things back up. When you are tracking, you have to be mindful of the things that trigger you, right? And so tracking is not for everybody. And that's just a cut, simple dry of it. Some people can't really handle the idea, down to the point where people are like splitting blueberries in a fourth, like splitting it in half and then splitting it in half again just to make sure that the macros are right. If you get into that point, you probably need to either chill, relax a little bit, or maybe just not even do it, right? And then the other thing is there are some concerns with accuracy. So, one of the big things that's been coming out lately is tracking watches, right? Um, when you work out, they're not necessarily the most accurate. Well, tracking apps can be just as inaccurate, right? Part of it is a user error, meaning that you're not putting the information in correctly. Part of it can be that they don't have certain things in their database. So let's say you went to a local spot and got one of their famous, I don't know, smoked turkey omelets. I just made that up. I had one like a couple weeks ago. It was really good. But anyway, you don't know what they're putting in there. The app don't know this local restaurant, so it doesn't have it in its database. So you can be very inaccurate. And then just in general, um, tracking can be inaccurate if the ingredients list or label isn't accurate as well. So just keep that in mind. Or if you say it's the wrong type of thing, right? If you think something is one thing and it's something else, that could also be a form of inaccuracy. So you just got to keep that in mind. Those are the cons. So keep that in mind. If you are trying to track, if you're a person who has obsessed or been a little obsessive with food, maybe really think about it before you do it. If you're a person where you know that um, certain things can kind of trigger negative behaviors or behaviors that aren't really conducive to a healthy relationship with food when it comes to tracking, then it's probably not for you. But if you are a person who is either trying to assess what you're eating, manage your weight, or trying to manage a medical condition, tracking could be a good option. So just keep that in mind. Now, I want to give you some tips. Before we leave today, I want to make sure that you know what are some good practices when it comes to tracking. The first thing is you don't have to start at tracking, right? If you're trying to assess what you're eating, you can start by journaling, which is just doing what we call a food recall, literally writing down everything that you are eating throughout the day. Doesn't even have to have numbers necessarily attached to it, but this is just a good way to look and assess at what foods you're actually eating throughout the day. Sometimes we just need to kind of shift what we're actually eating, right? If you realize that breakfast has a lot more carbs, going back to the example with the chicken and biscuit, than you thought about, then maybe instead of getting the fried chicken, you can do a grilled chicken breast on a biscuit, right? And instead of getting the wedges, you can maybe do something else, just like a little something else, whatever that is. That may work for a lot of people, and it's easy, and you don't have to be obsessive to figure those kinds of things out. So sometimes just journaling is a good option. Use photo or mood tracking. What this is being accountable, thinking about what you're eating, but also you can track your actual body's progress, right? With photos, you can definitely track how food makes you feel in the moment with mood tracking. But you can also use photo tracking to take a picture of the actual plate itself. You can look at kind of the portion sizes of how you started to now. You can use it paired against something like the My Plate method to see how closely you are with your portion sizes. Remember, I think it was last week, but I talked kind of a little bit about portion sizes. For the most part, in general, you want your carbohydrates or your starches specifically to be about the size of your fist on the plate. You want your meat to be about a fist to a fist and a half, depending on kind of how active you are. And then you want those vegetables to be about 2 fists, right? So you could take those photos and see kind of how close you are and see what you need to adjust. The other thing you can do is when it comes to data, if you do get to the point of tracking, journaling, wherever you kind of land on this spectrum, make sure you use it as a tool to assess what's going on and what you need to adjust. Do not use it as a tool of judgment. That's never going to end well. It has never ended well to sit and pick yourself apart, because that does nothing in the long run as far as being beneficial to you. It's not healthy from a mind standpoint. It's not really fixing any of the issues when it comes to not having good relationships with food. It's not fixing anything when it comes to portion sizes and things like that. So it's never beneficial. One of the things that I kind of check at the door, to be honest, when people come in my office, is if you start the conversation off by basically talking about yourself the whole time. Yeah, I know I shouldn't be eating this, and I know I should. Okay, congratulations. I'm glad you know that. Let's figure out what we can do to get you to the next level, right? Because just knowing you shouldn't do something doesn't mean that it's going to stop you from doing it, right? We know that addictions are real. Food addictions are also real. Sugar cravings are real, right? Cravings itself is real. Emotional eating is real. So again, it doesn't benefit you to use this information as a way to be negative to yourself, because that solves nothing. It just honestly, uh, it does quite the opposite, right? It can account or allow you to end up spiraling, and we don't want that. We want you to use this information to become the best version of yourself. So remember that. Don't allow yourself to put yourself in a state of judgment when you realize maybe you didn't realize you were eating as much or or as little, or maybe you didn't realize that your macros weren't balanced. That's all of that is fine. That's what this is for, is to be able to fix it, right? The other thing is learning versus perfection. This is a learning exercise. It's a learning tool. It's not to be perfect. If you look, when I track, sometimes I'll be 100 calories over. Sometimes I'll be 5 calories under. Sometimes I'll be, 200 calories over. It doesn't matter, because I'm using it as a tool to track what I need. But if I go over, it is what it is. I have tomorrow. If I'm under, honestly, I try to make it up if I can. But because me personally, I'd rather be a little over than under, because you just don't want to be out here hungry. But whatever it looks like, just remember that it's not about perfection. The other thing is that really helps with tracking in general is, number one, planning ahead. Especially if I know I'm bringing a lunch to work, I will try to make that lunch the night before, go ahead and put it in the calorie counter, see how much protein, how much fat, how much carbs. And if I need to adjust, I have time, right? Same thing with breakfast. If I know I'm kind of eating around the same type of breakfast daily, then I'll go ahead and put it in so that I don't have to worry about that, because this is a time saver. Another thing that's very beneficial for food tracking is a food scale. This helps you to be more accurate, okay? Because your 4 ounces ain't necessarily my 4 ounces. Now, back in the day when I was a chef, well, I'm still a chef, but you know what I mean. When I was like active as a chef, I used to work at a steakhouse, and I worked at a few steakhouses, but I would be on the grill. And so I got so good, especially with cutting meat, where I knew what 4 ounces felt like. I knew what 6 ounces felt like, 8 ounces, 12 ounces, whatever it was. But guess what? There were days where I was not as accurate as I could have been, right? It ended up being like 3.9 ounces. Or, I'm thinking it's 4 ounces, but it's a longer cut of meat. And so it's really, I overcompensate and it's 5 ounces, So all of that to say, the scale ain't gonna lie, right? The reason why I knew that I was either over or under, because I would cut it, then I'd throw it on the scale. And once I kind of caught my groove, I'd just be able to cut it, throw it on the scale, and throw it. But this is getting about me. It's not about me. So my point in saying that is, even a person who had to learn how to be accurate when it came to ounces and stuff, I still use a scale, because I'm human. I could be off, right? So a scale is definitely good with tracking. And then it makes it a lot easier in the long run, because sometimes Tracking apps will do serving sizes. Sometimes they will do, and they'll say a serving size is like 15 chips, right? But 15 chips, a chip could be this big, a chip could be this big. So if I'm choosing 15 chips that's this big, it's definitely going to be more calories than what it say. If I'm choosing 15 chips that's this big, it's probably going to be less calories. But on the side of a serving size, it always has the grams. And so that's what I tend to go by, grams. I just set my scale and I line it up to the grams that I want. Perfectly fine. Now, the other thing is putting your recipes, especially if you have a tracking app that does recipes, put them in ahead of time, right? Making sure that you know what you're making. If you look through my app, which I'll show y'all in a second, I have so many recipes on there. It's kind of crazy. So what I'll do is as I'm cooking my food, I'll see what I have. Let's say, keep it simple. Let's do spaghetti, right? Which I don't really eat spaghetti nowadays. It's a whole nother story. But at its simplest form, if you're just making a quick spaghetti, you can measure everything out before you put it in that pot, right? How much oil you're going to use. If you use oil, the amount of sauce, you can account for that and create this recipe within the app. And it normally spits out how much it, and then at the end, you can tell how many grams it is total. And guess what? If you do that, how many grams it is total, now you can measure it out by grams and you know exactly what's in there. So just keep that in mind. And then the last thing is using tracking apps. I've been talking about this all day, but if you are tracking, using a tracking app versus trying to track by hand, it's going to be way, 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 way easier. I'm a dietitian. I was a chef who did ounces and all that stuff. And I will tell you to this day, I would never try to track my food by hand. I think that's insane with all of the apps and stuff out there. Now, there are people that do it. I'm not saying, no, I am saying that's insane. So, because we have the technology, just use the apps. It's not going to necessarily always be 100% accurate. Listen, these allergies are taking me out today. I haven't taken my allergy medicine yet, and I feel it, but I digress. So let's keep moving. So, the tracking apps, yeah, they were made for a reason. So use them. Now let's talk about some tracking apps in ChefBoyRDN Tries It. So this week I don't have any food with me. I do have some coffee, however. I've been drinking. This is a mug. I think my wife bought it for me a couple years ago. It says better things are coming. And I always believe that. So tracking apps. I have used a few. Back a long time ago when I tried keto, I did a keto tracking app, which I actually liked the interface of that app. It's called, I think it was like Keto Manager or whatever. And so I tried to use it when I wasn't on keto. It didn't really work out the same, but they had a pretty big interface and a big database of information. The other tracking app that I use that everybody knows is MyFitnessPal. I'm gonna be honest, I particularly didn't really like that one. It felt, and I haven't used it in a year, so I don't know how it is now. But when I did use it, it just felt almost like information overload. Like it was too much things to choose, and so it made it a little more difficult for me to kind of, because I'm a person, I want to know what everything is and if I'm choosing the best option. So when I get a lot of options like that, it can almost be a little overstimulating for me. What I settled on and what I currently use, one of my favorites, and I've been using it since, I don't even know, since I was in school. I used to use it in school to become a dietitian for projects and stuff to account for macros and stuff. But it's called Chronometer. And Chronometer is a free app. You don't have to pay any money. You can if you want to, and you get more options. But I like it because it has a big database. It's a lot of foods that's in there. So it's not a lot of, having to put in foods. The other thing is it makes it really easy for you to upload foods if it's not in there. So for example, if something has is not in there, like I don't know. I keep going back to chips, but let's just say a bag of chips. You can take a picture of the back with the nutrition label, and then you can take a picture of the front, and it will upload it itself. And then you can check and make sure all the information is accurate, right? So it makes it very easy. You can also do as many recipes as you want. I have bunch, bunch of recipes. And so I use those all the time. It has a favorite section for the foods that you eat a lot. You can put it in your favorite section. It also has a recent section. And so with the recent section, it's just all about the foods that you have recently eaten. So you can put that in there too. So it's just a good way to track. What I will say is find the tracking app for you. When you set up the tracking app, be as accurate and realistic as possible. This is for you, right? So don't lie. And what I mean by that is it asks for your weight, put in the weight. It's fine. It asks for typically your desired weight, throw that in there too, right? Um, and then when it comes to the tracking, it'll tell you kind of again, as I said at the top of this show, it'll tell you what maintenance calories look like, what calorie deficit looks like, and what a calorie surplus looks like. And so you can kind of choose which one you want to do and go from there. It will also automatically help you set up your macronutrient ratios. Now, if you're not a person who's big into macronutrients, I would just leave it as kind of default, but you can adjust those settings. But for the most part, they do a pretty good job of balancing out your proteins, your carbohydrates, and your fat. So you typically don't have to adjust that too much. So the other reason I like Chronometer is it allows you to upload your physical activity. And so there are two ways. There are two ways it has it set up where one, you can either not account for the physical activity, meaning, let's say you set your goal for 1900 calories, then it won't change if you work out and you expend or expel 400 calories. Then they have it where it accounts for the physical activity. Now, if you are just starting out, I'm gonna be honest with you, go ahead and account for that physical activity, because the watches aren't as accurate as they need to be per se, but they are fairly accurate. And accounting for that physical activity will help you to not feel like you're starving and hungry, and undereat. Undereating doesn't really is not beneficial for weight loss. As a matter of fact, it kind of puts your body in a kind of a state of stress, and you'll probably not really lose like you think you would if you're under eating. So you want to hit that sweet spot of being in a calorie deficit, but not grossly under eating to where you find yourself starving and it's not effective. My number one go-to is going to be Chronometer, but you can try My Fitness Pal, and there are so many other ones out there nowadays. So definitely try them. Let me know what you think. If you try Chronometer, I definitely want to hear about it. If you try a new one and you really like it, tell me about that one too. So maybe I can add it to my list. Now for the vitamin of the week. This week we are actually talking about a mineral. The mineral is going to be iron. So iron has been there's been a lot of controversy around iron recently, and I'm gonna kind of circle back to that as we talk about it. What does iron do in the body? Well, iron is a metal, and when we talk about iron, it's iron. It's real iron. We're not talking about something else. It's like the metal iron. What it does in the body is it actually um, is a part of this protein called hemoglobin. And hemoglobin is the thing that allows oxygen to stick to our red blood cells to be carried. And so iron is a big part of that protein. It's actually the center of that protein. So iron is very important for oxygenation. It's important for energy levels. It actually supports brain function. It helps with the development of the immune cells. I mean, you think we're talking about red blood cells here, right? So anytime you're talking about blood cells, immunity has to come into that. that conversation. So it definitely helps with that. And it helps, of course, reduce anemia. Anemia is it can happen from a couple different things, but a lot of times they'll call it like iron or lack of iron anemia or something to that effect. And it's because our body isn't getting the oxygenation it needs because it's not having enough iron. So when it comes to increasing iron in your diet, you can definitely increase it either animal based or plant based. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you. Animal based iron will absorb a lot easier and a lot more efficiently into the body. Okay, but that doesn't mean that you can't get it from a plant based diet. You totally can. I just want you to understand that it comes a little easier from meat, to be honest. So where can you find and that type of iron that's found in animal products is going to be called heme iron. That iron is found in beef. We already know that. So all of the redness of the meat, that myoglobin, it's going to have a lot of that heme iron in it. It can also be found in poultry, fish. I mean, pretty much all your meats, red meat, shellfish, things like that. Wild game, it's going to be found in that too. Now, other places or the plant based places that you can find it, when it's plant based iron, it's not going to be heme iron. And it's not as efficient as absorbing into the body, but it still will absorb. You can find iron in spinach, lentils, tofu, a lot of meat alternatives, and then fortified in things like cereal or baby cereals. Now, this is where we get to the controversy part. So there's a lot of videos out there of people saying that there is toxic metals in their baby cereal, like oat cereal, rice cereal, things like that. They'll put it in a little plastic bag, get a magnet, and then spin it around, and they'll see these little small specks of black. What they're seeing is iron. Now, the iron is actually collecting because they fortify it with iron. Again, as I said at the top of this segment, it's real iron. It's not like it's something different. It's iron. Our body needs it. Okay? It just is what it is. When you use a magnet, those iron little pieces, because it's very small, you really can't even see it, but those little pieces start to grab on each other and they form almost these little, almost magnetic shard looking things, right? But you have to realize that that's really just a powder kind of clumping up around the magnet. So when people say, oh, it's big shards of black, I didn't even see that in there. Well, you won't. It's like a powder at first. And they fortify those cereals. It's not a toxic metal, it's just iron. Babies need a lot of iron. You have to imagine that they are growing, they grow the most within like literally the first 3 months of growth. Um, Within a year, babies double in size. This is the only time within a year that you pretty much kind of double in size in a normal way, right? Could you imagine being one size this year and then next year you're double it as an adult? That's crazy, right? But babies do it. And so they need a lot of iron to develop, to grow energy, and to have the oxygen in their blood. And so they fortify baby foods with iron because um, the foods that they eat don't necessarily have a lot of iron in it. So that's that on that. So all those little videos, it's not toxic metal, it's literally just iron. It's powdered, it's added in there, it's perfectly safe to eat. um and then things that help you absorb iron better. So if you take iron with vitamin C, like doing like an iron supplement, and you drink it with like, or you take it with like orange juice, it's going to help your body absorb it better. For whatever reason, in the presence of vitamin C, our body absorbs iron a lot better. Also, one thing that can reduce iron absorption is the tannins found in coffee and tea. So if you are a person who is anemic, or you know you need some more iron and you're eating iron rich foods, definitely don't eat it while you're drinking tea or while you are drinking coffee. eat it either before or after. And I would imagine red wine too, because it kind of has those tannins, but I don't know that for a fact. So don't quote me on that. Now, cooking in a cast iron skillet also increases your iron absorption, because of the simple fact that a little like micro bits of the iron is being cooked into the food. Again, it's perfectly safe. This is actual iron that our body needs. Our body uses the metal iron. I don't know. Sometimes I don't think people make that connection, but when we're talking about iron, we're talking about iron, like actual iron. So if it's coming off the cast iron, as long as it ain't no old brittle, you see big shards of black in there, you shouldn't see that. But on a microscopic level, you are getting some of that iron to be released when you are cooking in cast iron. The last thing is they actually created this fish. You can find it on like Amazon and stuff, and it's like a fish of iron. And when you are cooking boiled items, you can put the little fish in there, and it naturally increases your iron. So that's another way that people do more of a natural iron supplementation. If you are doing supplementation, it should really only be done by a doctor. Um, as in, what I mean by that is if you need to take iron pills, that should be something prescribed by your doctor. It shouldn't be something you just going out and taking, because iron toxicity is a real thing. And the main way that people experience iron toxicity is from overconsumption of supplements. So, getting into that, that's the first thing. Accidental overdose, which is when, again, it's kind of hand in hand, right? If you're over consuming those irons, most iron found in fortified foods as well as natural irons and stuff, it's a little harder to have an overdose of iron from that. But if you are doing all of that and then taking a supplement and you don't really need it, you can definitely overdose on that iron. So be mindful, because again, you just need a little bit. Um, Genetic conditions. There are some genetic conditions that allow our body to absorb a lot more iron and not get rid of it. And when you have these toxicities, the signs will be nausea and vomiting, abdominal pain, fast heartbeat. What else I got on here? Low blood pressure and shock, organ failure, and even death in some cases. So you definitely want to be careful, because your body does need it, but it doesn't need too much of it. Okay. And if you're just eating regular foods, even foods that are fortified in iron, and you don't have any of these conditions that we just talked about, you'll be fine. It's just more about not overdoing it when it comes to the supplementation and stuff. Even taking a multivitamin, for the most part, taking a multivitamin, you'll be fine. Now, deficiency, there's tiredness, pale skin, shortness of breath, brittle nails and hair. You also can experience hair loss. I couldn't read my own handwriting. Cold hands and feet, like anemia. I put it looked like a B. Like I'm like bold hands and feet. What does that mean? But anyway, then the last thing is pica. Pica is when you are eating foods that have no nutritional value and you crave them. So this could be like people who eat, or I won't say no nutritional value, but not enough. People that eat cornstarch, people that eat ice, a lot of times people that eat detergent, like laundry detergent. I mean, I'm not here to judge. Mattress foam. What else have people eaten? Tissue. It's a lot of little things. Cornstarch and ice are probably the main two that you hear the most about. And if you do have that craving often, then it's very likely, or it's high, that you could be anemic. So just keep that in mind. And definitely go, see a doctor and see if you need to be on supplementation. That is everything about iron. All right. I want to thank you for spending the day with me. I hope you have enjoyed everything we talked about today. It's been a good one. So, definitely, if you want to track macros, I've kind of laid out the ways to do it here. And, don't do it by hand unless you're journaling. Definitely journal if you want to do that. But, like, trying to calculate it by hand is insane. Use an app. And, meet me back here next week. Um, be sure to like, share, subscribe, comment on all the platforms. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok at ChefBoyRD.N, as well as on YouTube, the ChefBoyRDN podcast, and everywhere you get your podcasts, Apple Music or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music. I'm even on iHeart. So there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to find me. All right. I will talk to y'all next week. Y'all have a good day. Bye.